Hello, Matthew Williams here with quick first impressions of my own Mavic. Updated the firmware, which allows the hyperlapse to work, as believe it or not they'd been shipping it for a week or so without the hyperlapse there, but now it's there in the firmware. The USB. It's a USB 3 cable they give you with it, but unfortunately it's USB 3 on the end of it. So it plugs in there to siphon off the internal memory. They've got 8 gigs of memory in there. Trouble is though, for USB 3, which requires the USB 3, USB-C cable and USB 3 adapters, it's kind of sad that it transfers off here at about 23 megabits per second. When I've got memory cards such as the SanDisk Extreme Pro, which if you take it out will transfer at about 90 megabits per second. So what does that mean? The memory in here and the transfer speed is slow. So that's first thing. Next thing I noticed, thankfully, remember this horrible thing where you have to physically connect a phone into here every time you want to go flying, because otherwise DJI won't allow you to fly more than 30 meters away. Well, guess what? They screwed up, because it will let you fly more than 30 meters away. It will let you fly without having to speak to their servers. So I was able to fire up the drone, put on my goggles and go for a flight without having to plug a phone in. Hooray! But it starts to fall apart a little bit when you realize that this doesn't work properly still, even though they updated the firmware to make it compatible with OcuSync 2. Guess what? This thing believes that you can take the iris down to 1. Right? The minimum iris on this is 2.8. So it's about 2.8 to 16. Yeah? But you can dial it in the menus down to 1. It doesn't do anything, but it would let you do it. Also, the image was very fuzzy. Very fuzzy. So it wasn't a clear, sharp image. It was actually a little bit blurred. And I hope they get that sorted out, because I don't want to be flying around with a blurry image, which is supposed to be HD. I'm a little bit concerned about this connector, because it falls off the battery when it's charging really easily. It doesn't hang on the battery properly. And but apart from that, I must say it flew exceptionally well. And it was, wow, the most quiet drone I have ever owned. It is absolutely brilliantly silent. So they've done a good job on that. They've done an excellent job on the movement. It moves in a very fluid and locked in fashion. So quiet. I got it up to 20 meters a second. So I think that if future firmwares actually lock down the drone in respect of having to plug it into a phone before you go flying, I'm not going to put that firmware on there. I'm going to stick to this firmware. So I'm happy with the firmware, even though it's obviously buggy, and I've had to upgrade the goggles to the latest firmware in order to be able to use them. And I'm going to test that now to see whether or not it now no longer works with my earlier drones, which is quite possible. DJI. Yeah. Still no feature on here to allow me to format the memory card in the drone. No feature in here to be able to format it through that. You still have to plug in a phone and go through the menus and do it on the menus of the phone. You can't do it in here. So still haven't worked that one out, have they, DJI? Yeah. And another pain in the arse was that it wouldn't allow me on the goggles to change any resolution. So it wouldn't allow me to change from 4K to 2.7K to 1080p 60. I couldn't change any of those settings. I also couldn't even see that there was an option for D-Log color or any of those. It wouldn't even show up. It just said none under video color. So I said none, no video color. Now bear in mind, this is the latest firmware that is out for this. right? I just did it before I went flying. So latest firmware on this, latest firmware on the controller, latest firmware on the goggles. This is the release latest firmware, and it wouldn't allow me to change the color mode, D-Log, H.264 to H.265, resolution. I couldn't change any of those things in the goggles. I had to go on a phone. I had to have a phone connected to be able to change those settings, which means you're not going to be having a great deal of fun flying at the moment with non-functional features like that from a brand new release to the market drone. So anyway, thanks for watching. I will keep you updated on more fun I find that doesn't appear to be quite right out of the box with this drone. But I must say, those are things I can probably live with, actually. I can probably live with those because I don't change the color modes when I'm flying. And I could always plug in a phone to change the resolution, which doesn't get changed very often. The fact that I could just put the goggles on and go flying, that's a bonus. I'm glad they screwed up on that because they haven't enforced it at the moment, but they will in future firmwares. I guarantee you that'll come back in, but for the moment they've released this firmware poor. So thanks very much for watching.